Welcome to Champagne Chats, discussions from the green room where we talk all things about the events industry. I'm Kate Woolley, also known as DJ Wildflower, and it's great to be joining you. Coming up, we have the fabulous and hilarious Bonnie Davies joining us. She is an award-winning producer and comedian. She has performed in comedy festivals from Perth, Melbourne, Edinburgh. She's a brilliant MC and host, and you may know her very famous alter ego, who's very famous for nothing at all, Famous Sharron. It's my absolute pleasure to have her here today. Thank you so much for joining me, Bonnie Davies.
You're welcome. It looked like I was crying then. Like, the accolades.
It was like 5 minutes of laughing before I could stop. You're just someone, honestly, who makes me laugh all the time. I know you're a comedian, but you are just a very naturally bubbly person. And you're one of those people, like, if ever I make you laugh, it makes me feel so good.
Someone else said that the other day. They were like, I just want to hear that cry.
I want to hear the Bonnie laughs.
Yeah. That's good for me because it means everyone's trying to make me laugh all the time. No wonder I'm so bubbly and having such a good time.
We're all there just being
you're like, come on. We can
dance monkey.
Validate me, Bonnie, validate me.
Okay, well, we're in an environment where full of entertainers who are in desperate need of approval. That is a very good space to be in when you're a comedian because you've got people who are wanting your attention.
Yeah.
Before you were a comedian, obviously that's something that you have evolved into. Tell me what your original training was. So I know that you went to the Perth Modern School.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a very, very fancy school. If you're from over east.
You can tell that you're not from here.
Yes. I know exactly.
When you say Perth Modern. Perth Mod, mate.
Perth Mod.
Okay. Perth Mod, yeah.
So I know it's a fancy school. And
it wasn't when I went.
Was it not?
No, it's fancy. Yeah. I mean, it was very creative. There was an amazing, drama department, music department, ballet moved there.
Yeah.
One of the things I really loved was it had the intensive language centre. So we used to have a lot of international students and even refugees. And also because it had so many specialist programs, people came from all over Perth to go to Perth Mod, and that really made it a special school.
Yeah.
For me, I loved it.
Well, and you were a special person in the special school because she's quite a clever one and you did quite well. You went to Perth Mod, and then what did you study after that?
I've actually never studied.
Oh.
I don't know if I've ever said that to you before.
No.
And most people assume that I've gone to university.
I think I've just assumed, to be fair, because of your skill sets, I thought this was a formal qualification. So I probably maybe just wasn't listening, and I'm not a very good...
If anything, this is the point of interviews, isn't it? You learn something new.
Yeah. So you left school, and then what did you go on to after that?
Well, when I was 15, I did work experience at the Awesome Festival. Mm-hmm. I think they wrote back to my school and said I was one of the best work experience. Like, I got a really glowing reference. I really just turned up and gave it my all. And so I used to go back in the holidays and volunteer because I just really enjoyed working there. And that was at the same time that I had decided that I wasn't going to be an actor. Because when I was a kid, I wanted to be an actor. And then when I was 15, I heard that WAPA, you had to do 40 hours of acting a week.
Oh, wow.
And to me, I was like, well, that's a lot of hours. And I thought, I want to do other things.
Yeah.
I don't want to just do acting. I'm interested in the world. So I thought, if I can't do 40 hours, then I'll be a bad actor. So then in my all or nothing brain as a 15-year-old,
right.
I just went, with no guidance, by the way, I just made this decision by myself. I was like, all right, well, I'll go do science. I went to...
That makes sense.
I was a really good science student. And so in year 11, I threw myself into science, was top. I went to a science camp in Canberra and all these different things. I had the most boring year of my life. I also quit all drama, all arts. I quit my sport. I just went all in on academia.
So you really are all or nothing. So you've gone full science.
I was always like that. Now that I've never really thought about that. I was all or nothing then. Meanwhile, Gary Chard, who was the director of Awesome Festival at the time, reached out to me and remembered me from the year before and said, would you and your best friend, who's a really talented writer and artist, which we didn't know at the time, I knew, but the rest of the world now knows. She's won heaps of awards and is very acclaimed. He said, you're both really talented. He didn't know what my talent was, but he liked me. Do you want to come in and just work on a project with some other teenagers? And all they did was bring us into the office, the Awesome office, which was all multicoloured and super cool, and just said, here's a space in the office. What project do you want to do?
Wow.
There was no workshops, there was no training, there was nothing. It was just, what do you want to do? And we decided that every other city had cool little magazines and amazing publications, and we were 15, 16. like, we want that in Perth, so we're just going to make it. So we made this little magazine called Square One. We could only afford to print 1,000 copies, so we called it limited edition. And then I think because of my work experience and then making the magazine, when I finished work experience, Gary actually offered me a job. I was 15 and Mum was like, "You're not leaving school." And I was like, "Of course I'm not." And he's joking. But when I finished high school, he offered me a job again because I was handing my resume out for summer work. I was going to go on a gap year and go travelling. And he offered me a job as office manager of Awesome Festival. And everyone in that role before me had an arts management degree and had done a lot of training.
Yeah, hence my assumption because of...
Hence your assumption, yeah.
Yes.
And so I thought, it broke my best friend's heart, I think that. And she's forgiven me now. But I had to make a choice. Do I go travelling for a year? Because I said to him, I'll work for you for half the year. And he's like, that's not how a festival works. Like, you're all in or you're all out.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is too good an opportunity.
Yep.
So then the next 3 years essentially became my degree. So I did accounts. I was his PA. I ran the volunteers. I learned how to write funding applications, all the things you learn in a university degree. And I didn't realise how much I was learning at the time.
Look, I'm going to say, to be fair, with having had a degree, I learnt more in my internship.
Yeah.
So you just, look, it's a piece of paper. You went straight in and you got this fantastic experience with a brilliant mentor who already trusted you at 18 years of age just to go in and get there. So you're already streets ahead of so many people who were studying.
And I didn't really know that at the time. I didn't, I felt a bit left out because all my friends were making lots of friends at uni. Yeah. I was making heaps of amazing friends. The team around me were really beautiful. It was quite an intense role. And I was making lots of friends and it was a really magical time. Like, it was really wonderful. But I felt out of place, I wasn't at university. I had to just kind of keep turning up and doing my best at whatever I was doing.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the 3 years at Awesome Festival, because I had so much experience under my belt and I'd done extra projects while I was there as well, not just the ones I was paid to do, but I'd done extra stuff and volunteered for the youth advisory councils and just been really involved in the community. I was able to get a fellowship to go to the UK. So I worked with this amazing company called Blast Theory, who I still adore to this day. And I learned a lot from them. And that was me kind of leveling up to project management stuff. Yep. Whereas before I was admin, but then project management, you're kind of starting to manage things a little bit.
Yeah.
And worked in some temping stuff, did travelling, had a really great time.
Incredible.
And then came back to Perth a year and a half later and fell into the music industry, like Big Day Out. I'd already done some work for Big Day Out. Still remember when Zoe, who was the site queen, I'll say, on the site, because I was just, I was a sub in for, it's like a festival period. You come in and you do the work and then you go off and do other jobs.
That's right.
But I just loved working for her and I did a really good job. Had so many amazing experiences and I've learned from really admirable people. Merv, who sadly passed away, was site manager for Sydney. Merv is such an amazing guy. And I didn't know him that well, but I knew enough by the way that people talked about him and to him that he had real respect. And he was so lovely to me and I was just this site kid, I was just like some teenager in the office doing stuff. But he treated me like I was anyone else on the team. And I still remember one of the other site crew saying when Merv's in Sydney, when he's managing the Sydney site, which is his site, he's just there with 6 different walkie-talkies and he's, talking to emergency, talking to security, talking to site crew, talking to just everyone. He just stands there just going, chick, 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 chick. He's not running around.
Yeah.
Do you know, he's monitoring and he's solving, and I just really took that on board. So when I ran my own music festival, not my own, but a council music festival, Hyper Festival, and was the site manager for that, I always had that in my mind because sometimes when you're at an event you feel like you need to be doing things and you need to be lifting or moving, and I was like, no, I'm the site manager. If there's an injury, if there's a hospital, if there's 000, if there's security breach, I'm the one that makes the call.
Yeah.
So I need to be present.
Yep.
And I need to make sure I delegate and don't jump in.
What an incredible mentor to have learnt that from, because that skill set, when you see someone those really experienced site managers or project managers that can just keep it calm when everyone, and it's a very stressful environment. Like if it's
they know so much more about what's going on than anyone else does,
and they can just filter through, and people coming in and blowing up their face.
Tell what?
Yeah, and I know that you take that into your hosting experience, your herding cats experience, which is as a professional MC and host, you often have to do that as well. It's about being present and calm in the room once chaos all going around you.
Well, and sometimes it's as much about the preparation that you do as it is, how you are on the night. I'll ask a lot of questions about a gig before I get there. Like when I get to an event, I will check in with everyone and I will make sure I introduce myself to the tech, and I will check the lighting and check the sound. And because even though other people are taking care of that, it's my responsibility to make sure that it's happening.
Yes.
And to double check pronunciations or to ask any questions about the MC notes that I feel like might be a bit troublesome, or should we move this programming around? Because when I'm on stage hosting, or when Famous Sharron is, if it's not running well, it's her that looks bad or it's me that looks bad.
Absolutely, yes.
Because no one knows that,
I'm just going, this is just what the run sheet. Yeah. They don't care. They're experiencing it.
They're experiencing. So, and I need to be able to know where things should be. So if they're not where they are, then I'm not worried about it. I can improvise. Yeah. I can be calm.
Yeah.
It's kind of my favourite thing when things go wrong at an event, because I'm like, all right, now I'm
skills.
useful.
Exactly.
And often, if something goes wrong, you ask an MC to fill. I know I have an event manager friend who says most MCs, they'll be like, no, what are you talking about? Like, can't fill. Famous Sharron can fill. She can chat to the audience. She can bring people up on stage. She can do selfie training. She can chat about her own life. She can do the worm. Like, what do you need? Yeah. Like, let's fill it and make it fun.
Currently, most people would know you as your famous alter ego, or would know your famous alter ego, Famous Sharron. You evolved Sharron out of your stand-up comedy work because you're a stand-up comic, which I just think is an incredible skill set in itself. I think it's such
love attention.
It's such a brave thing. I love watching stand-up comics and hearing about their stories. So they go to comedy clubs and talk about preparation. I'd love to know a little bit about how you got started in comedy. You're a funny person and you're a producer, but how does that translate to, I want to stand up on stage in the most terrifying environment and try and make people laugh?
It was an accident. And I think I've actually interestingly felt like an imposter most of my career. And when I got into comedy, I was a producer. So I was working at a hyper festival and I was working on Red Bull Air Race and doing Big Day Out and things like that. I discovered comedy in the UK, and when I came back to Perth, I started going to comedy nights, but it's Perth. So as soon as I went to a comedy night, I saw someone I knew on stage, started chatting to them, just realised that comedians in Perth at the time, and it's changed a lot now, they're really good at promoting. But back then they just didn't really promote. So you didn't even know that there was stand-up happening, and live stand-up, like when it's good or when it's fun or experimental particularly, there's nothing like it, and you'll never have a repeat of that night. So there's just something really electric about that, and I got a bit hooked on that, and then I started trying to help them promote.
Oh, cool.
So then I got to know everyone. There was this beautiful room called Shapiro Tuesdays around at the time, and one of them said to me one day, when's your 5 minutes? And I told him to F off. And then I said, if it's a bet, I'll do it, because that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Actually, I was working at Big Day Out at the time, and I made a Facebook event that said, I'll be your comedian if you'll be my rent-a-crowd. And heaps of people from Big Day Out came, heaps of my friends. We sold out the night. Obviously, it went very well because it was full of my friends and family. But, I got the buzz and I just felt like such a high. And so then the next day I thought it was all friends and family. I actually don't know if I'm funny at all because that wasn't real. It was just a prank and people were having a good time. So I signed up for Raw Comedy, and back then you could just sign up the day before. Now it fills out months before. I went with my best friend and my sister and told no one. I didn't have time to get nervous because I was called up early by accident. So I was on the way to the bathroom, and then they were like, Bonnie Davies. And I was like, I ran up on stage and was like, I'm not meant to be here. I'm meant to be in the bathroom right now. And then I realised that they all thought it was a bit. And I was like, oh, no, like that's literally, and I just went straight into my set and killed like I have. And then I spent the next 2 years after that trying to kill that good again. But I was just in my element and went straight through to the semi-finals. I didn't get into the finals, but I had something. And I knew because I'd smashed it that night, But, it was an accident. So I didn't even say I was a comedian. I said I did comedy for years. But then when I was producing and doing this festival work, I was working with artists all the time and telling them to go for it, to back themselves, giving them advice. And I realised I'd found this thing that really gave me a buzz. And I thought I'd been selected for some showcases and I kind of had a bit of success and I'd made it to the final of Raw by then. I thought, I've just got to give this a crack.
Yeah.
So I quit my career because I actually worked Red Bull Air Race, and that 6-week period crossed over with the Perth Comedy Festival at the time, and I had to choose between doing comedy gigs or doing Red Bull, and I was like, oh, this is a sign that these are not compatible. Events are evenings, weekends. Comedy is evenings, weekends. Yeah. And so I gave it a year and then it went pretty well, and so I kept doing it. And then I invented Sharron by accident. Kind of because I was the last MC left in Perth.
So I need to hear the story about how you invented Famous Sharron. Which is invented because the story is that you invented her by accident.
Yeah.
But tell me how she came to be.
There used to be this thing every 3 years everyone would leave Perth. Yeah. And so there'd just been a mass exodus of comedians and artists, and particularly comedians. And there weren't many MCs around, and they liked comedy MCs for burlesque. And there was this big Hollywood gala burlesque show, and they asked me if I would host it. I was like, sure. Yeah. And as she was talking about the show, it's like big fake martini glasses and Marilyn Monroe impersonators and all of these like fabulous, amazing acts. I was like, I'm like dressed nice today, but I used to be real casual. Yeah. And ripped jeans and all that stuff. And I said, do you want me to do a character? Because I feel like this needs that. Yeah. She said, I didn't know you did characters. And I was like, well, I don't, but I feel like maybe I should. Yeah. And she's like, I'd love that. What kind of character? And I was like, well, I'd just seen Shavana, the host of Briefs, and she was really glamorous and fabulous and changed outfits all the time. But she was from Brisbane and it was iconic. Like I love seeing that glamour, but that Australianness as well. Yeah. And I hadn't really seen that on stage. Everyone always pretended to be French or American or English or just from anywhere except Morley Galleria. And I was like, in my childhood, Morley Galleria was the shopping centre. Like it was the place. I was like, can I be Australian and change outfits all the time? And she was like, great, what about a talent agent? I was like, fabulous. Love it. But people just got it. And even though Sharron only had 2 jokes, Bonnie had spent years learning how to improvise, and I'd been to Edinburgh a couple of times, 3 times by that stage as an open mic, like young, fresh comedian. And Edinburgh, you get more stage time in a month than you would get in a year here. Like it's just phenomenal. So I learned so much about what was funny, what wasn't funny, but I especially learned about improvising because I learned I didn't have that much material and I really had to just work with the crowd and make stuff work because you want to keep them there.
You do, yes.
And you want to make them laugh, and so you figure out ways to do it on the spot. And Sharron took all those skills and just rolled with it. So even though I only had 2 jokes, I was able to improvise that night and get away with it essentially.
Brilliant.
But I was like, oh, there's something with this Sharron thing. And then she just kept getting asked to do things, and I always talk about her in third person because she feels like she's a different person.
And that's interesting.
She was still Sharron, the talent agent for Fringe World. And then once that had finished, I was like, okay, so what do I call her social handles? What do I call her website? And she was always talking about fame. And then I realised, oh, she's Famous Sharron. She's very famous for nothing at all. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea.
And the penny drops.
She's very famous for nothing at all. Famous Sharron. Yeah. That's her name. Yeah. That's what we'll call everything. And that's when I feel like she was created, because then I was like, I get it now.
You get it, yeah.
Okay, she's a thing.
One of the factors of your success is down to how much planning goes into comedy. Like you can be a funny person, but jokes and timing and setting up a situation to create that environment, there's a hell of a lot of work that goes into it.
My experience of it is that there's a combination of practice and being in the zone. Like you kind of, the more you notice patterns and jokes, the more you notice them. So, if you're writing a lot, you notice a lot. If you're watching a lot of comedy, you notice more. And then there's also kind of being match fit because the timing and the delivery is really key. If you're not match fit, you can easily miss a moment. It's kind of like a bad party. If the lighting is bad, it feels a bit off.
It just feels
you don't know why.
Yes.
And it's the same with comedy.
And that's why Bonnie Producer just sets up Famous Sharron so beautifully, because the production specs are so important to do a job really well. Are there things that you feel like you've taken from Sharron that have enhanced you as a performer?
She's taught me self-care. Before her, I used to be able to work all day, then run straight to a gig, in whatever I was wearing and roll out the jokes I'd written in my lunch break, or, I could push myself to the absolute limit. Whereas Sharron has a rep to protect and she has to be on point and she has to be, and so she taught me to look after myself, because suddenly I couldn't just keep going. I had to make sure that I knew the jokes, that I just couldn't get away with it.
Yeah.
And so I've worked backwards, and now I have a whole self-care routine before a gig, and then going in as the best version of her.
Exactly. You've been working with a lot of people and helping build people up, and you admire about various other performers, how they're giving their energy. Do you now work with any particular mentors that help you in this next phase of your growth?
I have had some really brilliant mentors come through, and I did reach out to one of them recently for some advice. And then I've decided to just hold on that for a moment and just let the strategies that I've pushed out to see, just see where they go. Yeah. And I feel like I have more reflection built into my life now. I used to hear podcasts or read news articles with leaders saying, the walking time is when you have your real genius moments, or it's good to step back and, this is really important. And I used to be like, ha, 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 I don't have time. I'm just going to work harder, as if. And then actually that's the thing I needed most. So it's kind of funny that I had, I wasn't ready for that information.
Yeah.
I ignored that for so long. And then as soon as I started stepping back to move forward, it became so powerful, but it feels counterintuitive.
It does. I appreciate the time and effort it takes for you to come here today.
I love sequins.
I always like sequins. and we
M&Ms.
We do love a bubbles.
Yes.
And I just very much appreciate you being here today. And it just makes me so happy to see like the sparkle and the mojo and all the good things coming to you that just you deserve, because you're an amazing person.
Oh, thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Champagne Chats. Thank you so much to my lovely friend Bonnie for joining me today. If you enjoyed watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe on YouTube or any of your favorite podcast platforms. And remember, may the only pain in your life be champagne. Cheers.